In the early hours of a cold February morning in 1862, the tides of the American Civil War were about to turn in a small fort along the Cumberland River. The Battle of Fort Donelson, often overshadowed by more famous battles, was a moment teetering on the brink of history. Here, an unassuming Union general, Ulysses S. Grant, would make a stand that not only changed the course of the war, but also his destiny. This is more than just a battle. It's a story of resolve, strategy, and unexpected twists, set in a time when the nation was divided and the future uncertain. The American Civil War, beginning in 1861, was rooted in deep-seated regional differences between the North and South, primarily over slavery and states' rights. The war officially commenced with the Confederate attack on Fort Sumter in April 1861. Prior to the Battle of Fort Donelson in February 1862, there were several key battles, with both sides vying for strategic advantage, setting the stage for this critical confrontation. On the evening of February 11, 1862, Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant convened a crucial war council with his generals to discuss an overland attack on Fort Donelson. The consensus supported Grant's strategy, with Brigadier General John A. McClernand being the sole voice of reservation. The next day, Grant's forces left their staging ground at Fort Henry, embarking eastward towards Fort Donelson. Concurrently, Flag Officer Andrew H. Foote steered his western flotilla into the Cumberland River, preparing for a naval bombardment of the Confederate stronghold. Fort Donelson, however, presented a formidable challenge unlike the recently conquered Fort Henry. As the Union troops marched along Ridge and Telegraph roads on the morning of February 12th, the weather turned mild, and the roads dried, aiding their advance. Brigadier Generals McClernand and Charles F. Smith led their commands, while Brigadier General Lew Wallace and 2,500 men remained at Fort Henry. The journey to Fort Donelson and the nearby town of Dover was arduous, traversing steep hills and deep ravines, yet the troops maintained a spirited demeanor. Unhindered by Confederate forces, they made steady progress. Simultaneously, Foote's gunboats, escorting reinforcements, advanced up the Cumberland. The USS Carondelet led the flotilla, signaling its approach to Grant by bombarding Fort Donelson. By the evening of February 12th, Grant's forces had reached the Confederate defenses surrounding Dover, with minimal opposition. However, Confederate resistance, led by Colonel Nathan Bedford Forrest, soon emerged, though it was quickly overcome by Union infantry. Grant had confidently predicted an unopposed march to Fort Donelson, but General Gideon J. Pillow's absence, busy arguing with Brigadier General John B. Floyd in Cumberland City, meant Brigadier General Simon B. Buckner was in charge, adhering to orders to avoid direct conflict. This allowed the Union forces to approach without significant difficulty. Generals Smith and McClernand positioned themselves to enact Grant's plan, surrounding the fort and waiting for Foote's gunboats to replicate their success at Fort Henry. Grant believed this strategy would be time-efficient and spare lives. As night fell on February 12th, the Union Army observed the Confederate campfires from across the ravines, with the Confederates cornered against the Cumberland River. The Confederate morale was bolstered by activity at the river, where Confederate steamboats ferried troops and supplies, greeted by cheers from the shoreline. With Floyd's arrival on the morning of February 13th, the stage was set for the ensuing battle. The first day of fighting at Fort Donelson, February 13th, was marked by 2 sharp infantry attacks and a naval bombardment. The engagements, while significant, were not full-scale battles. Generals Smith and McClernand, despite orders to the contrary, engaged the enemy, testing the Confederate defenses. The USS Carondelet, under Commander Henry Walke, engaged in a diversionary bombardment, drawing heavy fire but achieving little tactical gain. In the morning, Smith's division advanced towards Buckner's position, revealing Confederate artillery locations. Despite Grant's orders, the Northern troops engaged in a fierce battle, leading to heavy casualties on both sides. Meanwhile, McClernand's sector saw similar action, with his forces attempting to silence Confederate artillery through a vigorous assault. The day's events at Fort Donelson demonstrated the resilience of the Confederate defenses, suggesting that the Union's task might be more challenging than anticipated. The bravery and determination of both sides were evident, setting the stage for a pivotal moment in the Civil War. The Haney-Morrison attack on Fort Donelson faced severe obstacles: accurate Confederate fire, disorganized Union attackers, and challenging terrain. These factors shredded their assault, leaving 150 fallen Union soldiers near the Confederate battery. In a poignant moment amidst the chaos, Confederate soldiers risked their lives to save wounded Union soldiers from fires ignited during the battle. However, hostilities quickly resumed, underscoring the bitter nature of the conflict. Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant, confident in Flag Officer Andrew H. Foote's naval prowess, anticipated a repeat of their Fort Henry success. Despite Foote's reservations due to previous flotilla damage, Grant was adamant. He ordered Brigadier General Lew Wallace to bring reinforcements from the Tennessee River, forming a 3rd Division to strengthen their siege, now comprising approximately 21,000 men around Dover. The bitter cold night of February 14th brought harsh conditions for the soldiers. Temperatures plummeted, and snow, sleet, and freezing rain battered the men, who were forbidden from lighting fires. Many regretted discarding their blankets and overcoats during their march from Fort Henry. The Confederate troops fared no better, resorting to quilts and carpets for warmth. On Valentine's Day, Grant met with Foote to discuss naval support. Foote proposed waiting for additional artillery, but Grant insisted on immediate action. Foote reluctantly agreed to attack as they had at Fort Henry. The Confederate gunners, having anticipated the attack and prepared their defenses, delivered devastating fire upon the Union gunboats as they approached. The Union naval force suffered heavy casualties and retreated in defeat, much to the surprise and elation of the Confederates. Confederate generals Floyd, Pillow, and Buckner, buoyed by their success, planned a breakout from the siege. However, confusion and disagreement about the escape plan led to missed opportunities, and a failure to capitalize on their momentary advantage. As the Confederates prepared for their assault, the Union forces remained unaware of the impending attack. The morning of February 15th saw the Confederates launch their attack, catching the Union forces off guard. Despite initial success, the Confederate assault lost momentum due to disorganization and the timely intervention of General Wallace, who blocked their escape route. The Confederate generals, indecisive and conflicted, eventually ordered a retreat back to their defenses. Grant's return to the battlefield marked a turning point. His decisive leadership rallied the Union troops, who quickly stabilized their lines and pushed the Confederates back. The Confederates had missed their chance to break the siege. On the night of February 15th, as the Battle of Fort Donelson raged on, the Confederate leaders convened to discuss their dire situation. The meeting was fraught with disagreement, but ultimately, they concluded that surrender was the only feasible option left to them. This decision, however, was not universally accepted. Generals Floyd and Pillow, fearing repercussions if captured, chose to abandon their posts and fled across the river, evading capture. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Nathan Bedford Forrest, deeply disgusted with the decision to surrender, refused to accept this fate for himself and his cavalry. In a bold move, he led his men down the Charlotte Road, escaping the fort's imminent fall. Despite these high-profile defections, over 13,000 Confederate soldiers remained within Fort Donelson's walls. As a harsh night fell on February 16th, the Confederate leaders, facing the inevitability of defeat, decided to surrender. When Brigadier General Simon B. Buckner, now leading the Confederate forces at Fort Donelson, reached out to General Ulysses S. Grant to discuss surrender terms. He hoped for leniency due to their previous acquaintance at West Point. However, Buckner's expectations were quickly dashed by Grant's firm response. No terms except unconditional and immediate surrender can be accepted. I propose to move immediately upon your works. This unyielding stance left Buckner little choice but to accept the harsh terms, albeit with a touch of bitterness, as reflected in his reply that criticized the ungenerous and unchivalrous terms proposed by Grant. Despite the initial tension in their written exchange, the mood shifted to a more cordial atmosphere when the two commanders met in person. In this meeting, recounted in Grant's memoirs, a friendly conversation unfolded between the former classmates. Buckner remarked that if he had been in command from the start, Grant's capture of Fort Donelson might not have been so straightforward. Grant, in turn, acknowledged this, explaining his strategy had been tailored to the situation at hand, emphasizing his reliance on the Confederate leadership's decisions and his own calculated risks. Grant's triumph at Fort Donelson was a significant milestone in his military career, leading to his promotion to Major General. This victory, along with subsequent successes at pivotal battles such as Shiloh, Vicksburg, and Chattanooga, elevated his stature, eventually earning him the rank of Lieutenant General and the prestigious role as commander of all Union armies. Grant's military achievements and leadership during the Civil War played a crucial role in the Union's victory and paved the way for his election as President of the United States in 1868, marking a remarkable journey from a Union general to the nation's highest office.